Evening and welcome once again to Gaming Under the Influence. I'm Mike here with Alex, coming to you from Gaming at Green Dragon to talk about video games. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Not so bad. I'm enjoying Cronos New Dawn, which I hope we'll talk a little bit about today. What have you been playing lately?
I've been playing various Pokemon games, including the new Legends ZA, and dabbling a little bit in Battlefield here and there, the new Battlefield 6, which has given me kind of the itch, satisfied my itch for multiplayer FPS action. But otherwise, yeah, just Pokemon, really.
That's pretty cool.
Actually, I booted up Mafia, but I haven't really gotten too much into that, so we'll save that for another day.
Well, hopefully,
Mafia game.
After our discussion today, you'll be incentivized to try out this game,
Cronos,
which I think deserves more attention.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. We've been watching some footage, and it makes me want to go and play it immediately because it reminds me a lot of Dead Space.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game, and you know, about a year ago, I expressed in no uncertain terms that I was not a fan of Silent Hill 2 remaster by the same company, Bloober Team.
Right.
I thought I think they doubled the length of it. The human characters were hideous, and the puzzles were inane and tedious and illogical. I just didn't like anything about that remake whatsoever.
Too much of sort of stretching and bloating there.
Yeah.
It's kind of disheartening when it's a game that already exists and is playable and good.
Yeah,
to see them
on its own terms.
Yeah, exactly. To see them kind of take it and like stretch it, you know?
Yeah, that was unfortunate.
I don't
but
like that.
It's interesting to note that this is from a different development team within Bloober.
Team, yeah.
Different creatives and different people working on it. They were probably developed in parallel, actually.
Yeah, probably. If they only released a year apart, then there was definitely a huge overlap.
Yeah, and though I didn't like it very much, I think the success of Silent Hill 2 remake, probably primed the general public to take this more seriously.
Yeah.
So it was good that existed in that respect, and I'm really glad to see something like this from a mid-sized studio like Bloober. It's a new IP, which is tremendously risky, as we talked about previously, for any studio really in this day and age, but especially one like this. And
it's always a risky endeavor, but we always applaud, any new IPs that come out, because for that very reason, it's a risk, and a lot of companies just kind of avoid that risk entirely at this point in life, right?
And even a genre like this is not a money printing genre, right? It's never been the most popular at any point in time, and I think even in fairly recent history, it was almost confined entirely to like Steam.
Yeah, like the survival horror genre was kind of dead in the water in the last couple of
maybe a decade ago, I'd say. Yeah. I mean, there were people developing within the genre, certainly, but it was stuff like Outlast, Amnesia,
lower budget
game, The Forest, lower budget games, often launching in early access on Steam. It was unusual to see like a physical console release for anything like that until well after the fact of its release for PC users. And certainly there wasn't anything in the AAA space like that for a long time.
It's been nice that there's been this resurgence going on.
I think that though the games we just mentioned kind of paved the way for something like Resident Evil 7, which was inspired by a lot of them, right? The first-person perspective and the style of horror that you find in there. They even brought on, I think, Western creatives to help with the story in games like that. So, everything, I guess, has to do with everything when it comes to stuff like this. So all of these things make way for each other, and that's pretty interesting. But I do think it was around the time of Resident Evil 7 that renewed interest in survival horror as a video game genre.
Yeah, especially on the AAA scale.
On a AAA scale especially, and I think that peaked really with the Resident Evil 2 remake.
Yes.
In 2019, which I did actually enjoy quite a bit.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I thought that was a fantastic game. I did enjoy it a lot.
Dead Space remake came along.
Dead Space remake, that's right. Resident Evil 3, people didn't like it as much, but it was still pretty good in my opinion.
Yeah.
And since then, there's been just a ton of them, right?
Yeah, they've been coming out. There was even the Callisto Protocol. Another one people didn't enjoy very much, but I thought was pretty high quality, actually. There was just this year, the Silent Hill F as well, which was well received and I thought was pretty cool. So, yeah, in recent years, there's definitely been a revived interest in AAA survival horror games, and that's the context in which something like this is coming, And we can probably separate these games into, I don't know, different subspecies of survival horror. In my opinion, there's stuff like, I mentioned Outlast, and Resident Evil 7 is somewhat similar to that. There's like these first person ones. Yeah.
With a bit of a more focus on puzzle solving and less on just intense action combat encounters.
Right. Yeah.
Then there's stuff that's more inspired by Dead Space, I think. And I think Cronos falls solidly into that
it looks
category.
like it from the footage we've been checking out, just watching you play it a bit. It seems directly inspired by Dead Space in a lot of ways. And
yeah, definitely. There's some minimal puzzle solving, but it's nothing like Resident Evil or like, you know, anything like that, or even like Silent Hill, where there's just intense moments where you have to really kind of scratch your head and think about what's going on and find small pieces to use for something. Here, most of the puzzles are confined to like a small area, like you got to find fuses or something like that. Find a key for a door to get something extra, but by and large, the way it works is there's sections of exploration separated by like combat gauntlets or a boss, and you progress through the game by completing those. You know, it gives you an objective, like activate a generator in order to use an elevator. So you go through an area, fight enemies, separating you from your goal, and then you go back, right? So I think it's closest precedent to something like Dead Space. And, you know, that's not only in the aesthetic or the way that the progression occurs or how the levels are arranged. It's even in how, you know, in Dead Space, you may remember there's this dismemberment mechanic that's famous for. Here there's no dismemberment mechanic, but there's something where enemy corpses, if you leave them around, other enemies will be able to walk up to them and absorb them and their abilities. So there's a focus on always dealing with, in one way or another, with guys that you've already knocked down.
Right, not just leaving a trail of dead bodies, because that can screw you over, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you leave a bunch of dead bodies and you allow other enemies to come into the vicinity of them, they can absorb them and it'll really ruin your day. They turn into much more powerful enemies that take a lot more resources to kill. So
that seems like
you want to avoid that.
Like, novel thing, right?
It is, yeah. You can see it's obviously inspired by Dead Space. There's this, you know, innovative take on how you have to manage enemies, either while they're coming at you or after they're dead, but it's its own thing. And I like that a lot. And while it doesn't present any, you know, I've seen some people online complaining about this mechanic and how it adds undue difficulty to the game, but it's really not that much of a problem. You have lots of tools to deal with it. You know, the man-sized enemies, when they're merging, you can just melee them and it
interrupt them.
Yeah, it arrests the process and you can just go on fighting them. So it's not like it's a huge problem, but it's interesting that you have to think about managing that in the middle of combat encounters. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I feel like it adds a new sort of layer to the whole, like, survival aspect, which a lot of these encounters naturally feel like you're just trying to survive, because it's not like an action game where you have friggin' ton of ammo. Like, you're already trying to survive as is, and then once you finally get enemies down, you can't just leave them down, you have to deal with them. It really, like, exaggerates the whole survival horror, definitely. Right? Like, you're you're really trying to survive here.
That's right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and it even has like zero gravity sections, also inspired by Dead Space. You know, totally. The suit and the art really resemble Dead Space 2, though Dead Space takes place in space in the far future, and this takes place mostly in 1980s communist Poland.
Right.
Apparently in a city that a lot of the developers are familiar with. So
that's cool.
It's interesting that despite the difference in setting, it's very clearly inspired by Dead Space.
Oh, yeah, you can tell, even though it's not futuristic, it has a lot of that, like, imagery, and it really looks like, you know, like a Dead Space, not set in space.
Something we talked about before, that iteration is always interesting to see, you know, in most creative forms that's the case, but especially in video games, where one developer figures out something cool, some interesting procedural way to depict something, and another developer with a different idea, a different world to explore, a different story to tell, picks up on that and uses it.
Yeah, almost like a template, right?
Yeah, that's how all of the genre forms we're familiar with now developed in the first place, and it's cool to see that happening in something like this, you know?
Yeah.
There's not many Dead Space likes out there, if you will, right?
Yeah, so that's true.
Yeah, I find that very interesting, and I really like the body horror of Dead Space, the grotesqueness of it, you know, and even the way that you know, Dead Space, there's the necromorphs. The bad guys are like contorted human beings, and their bodies merge together, and they're misshapen and stuff. And here you got the same thing, right?
Yeah.
The monsters are these things called orphans, and they're affected by a virus that causes their bodies to meld together, you know. Wow. And that's why they can absorb each other if you leave them around. And the bigger guys are just kind of like assemblies of bodies of the smaller guys. And so it's
interesting.
Yeah, it's a really interesting aesthetic and thematic horror vibe that, you know, you'd think it'd be more popular, but in most cases, this is not something you see in contemporary survivor horror games. It's usually simple things like zombies, you know?
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, with Dead Space and this game and various other games, it's kind of made a similar thing, but without just relying on zombies. Because I kind of felt like I was fatigued and bored with, all the zombie games that have been coming out since the PS1 days, I guess, since the original Resident Evils, and we've seen zombies a lot, and these kind of follow a similar trend of like gameplay and horror, but while also not just relying on that trope, right, and doing their own thing.
Effectually, the enemies could very well behave like zombies. They just lurch towards you, and they're mindless, like humanoid things that were once men, but now they're not anymore. But I think like the fictional justification is what makes it interesting to engage with. There's
a little more creativity there. There's depending on the setting and stuff, like Dead Space really kind of went out there with the necromorphs and the dismembering, and then this game has these other monsters that can absorb each other and whatever, right?
That's right, for sure.
It's nice to see that it's not just zombies, at least.
I think so too.
Even if, like you said, it's very similar.
I think so too. I think it's interesting to see that in a fairly underpopulated genre space, that there's these sort of iterative projects going on where somebody's got a clear inspiration, but he seeks to develop an interesting and novel concept within that framework. It's not something you see every day, and I wish it happened more often, Something with clear precedent, clear inspiration, but still possessed of its own identity, clearly identifiable, right?
Yeah, and being a new IP really kind of gives it that, right? Helps it stand on its own, and even though it's risky, always give it the benefit of the doubt, because it's a risky thing, and I'm happy to see that this company is not just like, hey, we'll remake all the Silent Hills and that's all. They're like, no, we also want to make a new thing, right? Something their own new thing, that's right? Put their own stamp on the genre, and it, like you said, it's not it's not the most popular genre out there that doesn't garner mass appeal. So it's cool to see that it, even though it went away for a little while, it's kind of coming back in the mainstream space, and people are enjoying it, getting into, especially now around Halloween and stuff. It's kind of just cool.
Yeah, man.
Play a nice spooky game instead of just watching a horror flick or something.
I'd say that's probably the first reason why anybody should pay attention to this. If you're interested in the genre and its unfolding, its history, and the things that have come before and how they could influence what comes now.
Yep.
It's cool to check out something like this. See how the survival horror genre, how its roots are, giving way to new fruit nowadays, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Something cool and interesting.
Not just remakes and stuff, right? Like there was the Dead Space one and the Silent Hills and the Resident Evils, and even Silent Hill made an original game as well now, which is cool. They've been
I thought that was pretty good too
for a while.
Yeah, although I think this is a little bit better for a few different reasons, but that would definitely be the first reason I'd recommend this to anybody, because contextually it's interesting, I guess you could say, in simple terms. Where it came from and what it suggests about what came before is something that, if you like this genre, it's worth checking out. Definitely. But I think at a mechanical level, it's just cool to engage with as well. I described some of the mechanics already, but the basic elements feel good and interesting to play after going through a number of other games, like Silent Hill F, for example. There's a dodge mechanic. It's very action focused. It's almost like a Souls-like, though a little bit more plodding and chunky, I guess it controls as. But this game, you're slow. There's no dodge mechanic whatsoever.
Is there a run? Can you run?
You can run, yeah.
Run, yeah.
You feel like somebody walking around in a giant metal dive suit. You cannot dodge. You have to kind of just walk out of the way of things and position yourself carefully in combat, and just learn a slightly different skill set than what you do in most other games in order to get through it. And I think that's awesome, actually. It's probably the dodge mechanic in Silent Hill, the remake, and in F gives this away, but the fact that they chose not to include a dodge mechanic is I don't want to call it brave, but it's a good choice nowadays. They probably knew that would alienate some people, but thought it suited the concept, and so they went with it, right?
Yeah.
That's an admirable decision, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
It definitely feels like, just for that simple fact alone, like its own thing, right? I think even Resident Evil 3 Remake had a dodge. It's
really,
it's worked its way into everything, and I like dodging in most games.
I know you're a big fan of that, and I don't blame you.
It's not that I'm complaining about that. Souls-like's one of my favorite genres, but
you can't just throw it in everything and expect it to work, right? In this game, they clearly feel like you shouldn't be able to dodge because you're wearing this really big, heavy suit. It's same as Dead Space. You can't dodge in Dead Space.
You can't. Yeah. So mechanically, it's very interesting. The way you have to maneuver about the environment, how positioning is really important in combat,
right.
And in terms of survival horror, you know, it does have a lot of resource and inventory management that's clearly inspired by things like Resident Evil. Yeah. You have limited inventory spaces, which you can upgrade using limited resources that you find. You're always worried about how much ammo you're able to carry, your healing supplies, and, you know, finding stuff you can make money off of in the world. And you'd use that money to buy more ammo or upgrade your suit or your weapons or whatever, but you can't carry it because you have something in your inventory that you need. And it becomes this interesting, like, you know, sub game, this management thing in your head that you're constantly thinking about.
Putting the survival in survival horror, right?
Yeah. So you got to be careful not to carry too much stuff, too many healing supplies, too much ammo. But then you also have to think, well, do I need it? Right? You're always second guessing yourself and wondering about what's best to do in any given circumstance. So I like that a lot. Right? It does very much feel like a survival horror game in that respect. And this is something I think Silent Hill F got right too, but it's almost watered down by the fact that, like, with mechanical precision, you can deal with any encounter in that game.
Right.
You know? It's not really the case here, right? If you don't have enough resources, no amount of maneuvering is going to eliminate the enemies for you. Yeah. So I think that this is a pretty peak survival horror game design.
Yeah, you know what, I gotta say, like, a lot of people like Dead Space. It's a very popular game, and if you do like Dead Space, this looks right up that alley. And I know people have been kind of clamoring for new entries in the Dead Space, you know, like they celebrated when the remake was announced and then came out, and people want them to continue remaking 2 and 3 and whatever, but there's this game, and it deserves
a spiritual successor to Dead Space. In my opinion,
that's what I'm getting at. It deserves a chance. If you like Dead Space, don't miss this game for sure, right?
Definitely worth checking out, man.
Yeah, it looks cool. I actually kind of want to run home and jump into it.
Yeah, man, it's great. You know, you got the plotting movement, you got the resource management, but the real cool thing I like about it more than any of those elements is the exploration of the world. The world is really well designed and meticulously designed,
and it looks horrifying.
A lot of it looks it's quite horrifying. A lot of just like fleshy profusions growing off of concrete, and these like kind of arresting and alienating mashups of organic and inorganic stuff that kind of captivate you and hold your attention. So but at a physical level, like how the levels are laid out and stuff like that, how lore is delivered, it takes a page from Souls-likes after all, actually, because, you know, there is a story presented through cutscenes, and your character talks to other characters, and there's something that she's trying to accomplish in the world.
Right.
But trying to figure out what exactly happened in that world in the first place is something you got to piece together from the things that you see, you know, and from audio logs and from journal entries and documents you find lying around, like newspapers and stuff like that, right?
That's awesome.
Like, it's clear that there's this virus and that human beings have gone extinct because their bodies have all merged together and become monstrous and stuff like that. But how exactly this happens is only hinted at. You know, there's like documents you find about some Soviet engineers trying to dig a giant hole deep into the earth, and it suggested that the virus may have come from there. There's people talking about whether it's fungal or viral or if it's a disease, and nobody really knows. It's just, there's this aura of mystery about it.
Yeah, I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's something you're trying to piece together yourself as you play through the game, and I thought that was a really awesome element, you know, something that I appreciated as I worked my way through it.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, but the environmental design is something that really, you know, really keeps me going back, I guess, right? Like,
it's pretty striking.
It's fun to explore the environments and check every nook and cranny for resources that you can use, and all while you're doing that, you're like piecing together something about the world. It's quite interesting. And I think lastly, you know, at the level of the concepts involved, like, all of the stuff is pretty interesting. It's a lot of like interesting philosophical and even metaphysical questions that the game raises about what it means to be like an individual conscious being, and, you know, what kind of unity is desirable, and if it's good to be left alone or not, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it takes place in communist Poland, as I said, and your character is sent by this thing called the Collective, which you're not really sure of the nature of, but, you know, she tries to like collect people's consciousnesses and merge them into this thing called the Collective, which is, I guess, the form that people have survived in after this, you know, virus decimated the earth. But you're not really sure if she's human. You're not sure if the people whose consciousness she takes away, you know, if they actually survive, or if they're just like digitized like representations of the people.
Right.
And you're not really sure how this collective differs from the organic monstrosities that you're fighting the whole game too. They're called orphans, so I guess it suggests that they never really were merged properly with the collective, and they, you know, instead went on to physically merge together in this monstrous way. But it does raise the question, like, then what's the distinction between the two things at the end of the day, right? There's both there's this collectivity to both of those, you know, both of those orders, and you even end up asking yourself if they're the same thing, or if the collective is the one that is the thing that the force that caused the infection in the first place. And the game seems even ambiguous about that. They don't tell you straight up. So, and a lot of the characters you meet in the world, they're lonely and they're trying to find other people. It's just something that keeps recurring, and I think that at the conceptual level, it's interesting for that reason too. So I don't know, man. In my opinion, like, for various reasons, contextual, mechanical, you know, in terms of the environmental design, in terms of the background philosophy operative in the game and the narrative, this is all around a great package. It's something that I've enjoyed immensely, and I have no illusion that it's going to be nominated for something like Game of the Year, but you know, I kind of wish it would be, right? I think it deserves some consideration.
Yeah, I'm hoping there should be some category that maybe this narrative could fall under, right?
Some mention or something like that.
We'll
I don't
see
know.
In a couple of days when they announce the nominees, but yeah, I think it deserves some kind of credit for sure.
Oh, and the music is sick too. It's got like this awesome, like, haunting synth music that chimes in every time you're wandering over a hill and you see some like building looming in the distance. You know, there's it really goes hard on that 80s vibe, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely selling it on me, that's for sure. I mean, I already have a copy at home and I can jump into it anytime, but you're making me want to do it right now.
It's worth checking out, man.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic game, and I really like it a lot.
Yeah, awesome.
For all of those different reasons. Yeah, that's why I think it's worth checking out Cronos New Dawn. I'm pretty sure, given the jumble of, you know, bigger profile, higher profile releases came out around the same time and are still coming out, that a lot of people will overlook this game, and that would be a mistake.
True. There's there's a lot of other games that have come out in this around the same time frame. But yeah, like I said, if you like Dead Space, if you like survival horror, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, you're probably gonna like this.
Strong creative vision, clear inspirations, and awesome mechanics overall.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah. And I think another interesting thing is it incentivizes New Game Plus, because there's a third ending, a true ending, I suppose, that you can only get on your second playthrough. So
cool.
Yeah, it's like Silent Hill F in that respect, encouraging multiple playthroughs. But I guess maybe that's enough for today. I do suggest people interested in survival horror and horror in a general sense, in the history of this genre, they check out Cronos: The New Dawn from Bloober Team. It's a perfect time of year to do so, and
give it a shot.
Yeah, play your games, and we'll chat with you guys soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah.